Hello, everyone. I'm Al Neely with Listen Up Podcast, and today we have special guest, Dr. Gail Sahar. She is the author of Blame and Political Attitudes, The Psychology of America's Culture War. Let me give you a little bit of background about Dr. Sahar. She's a professor at the College of, is it Wheaton?
Wheaton College, yes.
Okay. And she's earned her bachelor's of art from University of Southern California, and then she went on to earn her PhD in psychology from UCLA. And they're rivals.
It's true. Yes.
Major rivals. Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Sahar's research and teaching focuses on social and political psychology. She's authored a number of academic articles and attitudes towards poverty, abortion, terrorism, and other issues with her most recent book, Blame and Political Attitudes, The Psychology of American Culture Wars. So, Gail, is it okay, or would you prefer doctor?
Oh, Gail is fine.
All right, so a lot of people, you spend a lot of time getting that doctor. They want to be called doctor.
That's true. I do know people like that. Yeah.
Don't call me anything other than that. Okay. So tell me how you came to write the book and what was your focus on with that particular topic?
Sure. Well, I had been doing research for a long time about sort of how people view the causes of social problems. And my research suggests that besides ideology, we talk a lot about ideology all the time in this country, that we're polarized, et cetera, but they kind of ignore the way people think about issues. And so my work is focused on kind of how people think about what causes poverty or what causes unwanted pregnancy or what causes terrorism. And so I've been doing that work for a long time, as I told you, like 30 years. And I began to be a little frustrated by the fact that when you publish journal articles, it's just a handful of academics that read it, right? You get people in your immediate field, and it doesn't seem like very useful if we're doing science just for other scientists. So I kind of decided that I wanted to write something for a more popular audience to get the ideas out there because I felt they were important. And I thought it explained a lot of the things that were going on in this country. I mean, I had worked on the book on and off for several years, but it just never stops. The kind of casting of blame for problems is just, it's throughout politics. I think it's gone on historically for very long, and I don't see any sign of it stopping in the future. So I felt like it was important to get that word out to the general public a little bit more. And I also just wanted to de-emphasize the ideology part, because I sort of feel like the media is telling this story. Americans are so polarized. There are two different camps. There's red states versus blue states. And I think an awful lot of people don't really fit into those categories. And I feel like they kind of get ignored. So we're really only talking about, the pundits on Fox News and the liberal media, et cetera. We're not talking about all the kind of moderate pragmatists that I think that many Americans are. So that was sort of the goal.
Gotcha. So one of the things I had a chance to read a little bit. I like to read before I have people on, so I didn't get a chance to read the entire book, but I read a little bit. Mm-hmm. You talk about cause, blame, emotion, and behavior. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was kind of interesting when you're looking at two different sides of why. Can you kind of go over a little bit of that, the cause, the blame, the emotion, and behavior, and how we don't realize that's what we're actually doing that's causing?
Oh, yes. Yeah, a lot of it is, I think, on an unconscious level. So the idea of the model I work with is that it assumes that people want to understand the causes of things around them. And this isn't just in politics, it's anything, right? You walk by a homeless person on the street, you wonder what happened to them? Or a friend doesn't show up to meet you for coffee, and you right away are going to think, well, why did they not arrive? Did they get in a car accident? Do they not like me anymore? Right. So we're constantly trying to understand why things happen.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because we want to understand the world. Human beings are curious creatures, right? And if we don't understand why things happen, we can't stop bad things from happening in the future, et cetera. So the idea is that we do this all the time, and the type of cause we choose has a big influence on our thoughts, our emotions, and then how we behave. So the simple example of my friend stands me up for coffee, right? If I think to myself, oh, they probably had a car accident, I'm going to feel really differently than if I think, oh, well, they're a jerk and they were inconsiderate and they didn't feel like showing up, right? So
Right
away, those cognitions have a big effect on emotions, whether I'm angry or I feel sympathy, for example. And if I blame them, the tendency is going to be angry. And if I don't blame them, I'll probably feel a little bit more sympathetic. And then it affects my behavior the next time I see that person, right? If I found out, well, they had a car accident, I feel sorry for them, I'm going to still be their friend. If it's something else and they just say, I find out they just didn't feel like it, then I'm probably going to behave differently toward that person in the future. So that's the idea. And what I've done is sort of apply it to political attitudes. So
Okay.
just as it applies in the social world, it applies at the political level. So if I think of, why is there homelessness? If I blame the individual, I probably feel angry with them and think I'm not going to help, right? And I don't believe in, government assistance, et cetera. But if I in fact think it might not have been within their control, like maybe they got fired or, all kinds of things could have happened to the person.
Right.
Then I'm going to feel sympathy and I'll be more inclined to help.
Right. Last year, did you follow the Daniel Penny and the homeless guy in the subway? Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you stay on top of what's going on. I would imagine that's what you do. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about that? Because there seems to be two camps with that, and I actually think there's a third, which I don't think anyone's thinking about, but that's just me. I like to ask why and what causes and things like that myself. So what were your thoughts about that? Why did we have, when you take a look at it from a political standpoint, you had basically conservatives looking at it from a particular standpoint that it was something that was needed, is vigilante.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah. And I'll say I haven't followed it as closely as some other issues, but I am aware of the case. And I have read a little bit about the two sides. And I think you're absolutely right. I think part of it, stems from whether or not you see the homeless person as basically dangerous criminal versus somebody who's mentally ill, right? And is having struggling at the moment. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that conservatives are more likely to think he was intentional, he was threatening, and that the guy who attacked him did the right thing and protected other people. And I think liberals are more likely to say, listen, mental illness happens. It's not our fault. It's uncontrollable. There's no reason to think he was going to harm someone. And therefore, I would feel sympathy for him and think, maybe something should have been done, but not what happened. Right. And I'm curious what your third route is with the...
I think you have to go a little bit deeper than that when you're looking at those situations. And when you're looking at those situations, being Black and growing up in a situation where you didn't address mental health, and you have trauma generation after generation, you get to a point where those things fall on one another. First of all, his family, plus he didn't understand what was going on with him. Now we're just starting to make mental health, we're starting to push it to the forefront. So people are a little more cognizant about it. But I feel like when you're constantly in an impoverished situation and you're in a situation where you're Black and you grow up like that, I feel like you're constantly dealing with mental health issues that the rest of society don't quite understand. And then they
Yeah.
see it as an act of aggression when somebody reacts in a way in which he reacts. But he probably should have been getting help from the very first time that he could talk, or he would be able to speak with someone. He said he had
Yeah.
schizophrenia. He was on several drugs. So there was an issue there, and it's been something he's been dealing with his entire life.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I think that part is, I think that's never explained or never considered when you have those type of incidences.
Mm-hmm. To make matters worse, I do in the book have a chapter about race and blame, and about how blame is allocated differently depending on someone's race.
Yeah.
And there's evidence suggesting that people automatically blame a Black man more than they would a white man who did the same thing. And there's more of a stereotype that this is going to be an aggressive person. So I think there were so many things, you're absolutely right, that were feeding into the response.
Yeah. I think that's embedded in our society. So
yes. Yeah.
It's caused me to take a long, when I see someone or I'm dealing with someone on the street and you could just tell that there's not exactly where they should be on the mental standpoint. I make it a point to have patience with that person and take time and try to understand. Whereas before I didn't. So years and years ago. Yeah, it's interesting. The more I learn that. You also talk about issues of sexuality in your book. What have you discovered about that?
Yeah, the book covers a couple of different things about sexuality. One thing I talk about in the chapter is about people's abortion attitudes.
Yes.
And that was actually my PhD dissertation was about people's beliefs about the causes of unwanted pregnancy and how that is related to abortion attitudes. And what I found was that people have a sort of stereotype of what a woman with an unwanted pregnancy is like, right?
Yeah.
So is she just irresponsible using abortion as birth control, or is she maybe a victim of sexual assault, right? And there's evidence that if it's something that happened that's out of her control, people tend to feel sympathy and think abortion might be justified. I think it's one of the reasons why sexual assault is one of the more acceptable reasons for abortion. Even among conservatives, they tend to be more likely to say, yeah, in that case, I would allow it. Not all do, but some. Whereas if it's something like where they see it as uncontrollable, as controllable, the person was irresponsible, then they tend to blame her and say, well, why should you have an abortion? You got yourself into this situation. They have a kind of you play, you pay attitude, right? So that's one section of it. Another has to do with beliefs about the causes of homosexuality. There's some evidence that people who see it as controllable, like a choice, are less in favor of gay rights, and people who see it as something that is outside our control, it's just who we are, tend to be more pro, same-sex marriage and things like that. So even with issues of sexuality, blame seems to really kind of factor in. And then the last section is about specifically rape and sexual assault, and the tendency that people have to blame even rape victims. People will often look for a reason why they deserved it, right? There's questions like, well, what were you wearing? And why were you out at midnight? Or that kind of stuff that still goes on, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's really looking for a way to say, you got yourself into this situation, so I don't feel sympathy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you don't think we're ever going to get to a place where this isn't going to be taking place, and we're not going to prejudge?
Well, I'm an optimist. I would say. I mean, I wrote the book in part that I hoped it might make us aware. And I don't mean to sound like I'm judging other people. And we all do it. Like we all, I think, are pretty quick to blame, right?
Yeah.
And so I just wanted people to think a little bit about it. Like, what evidence do I have that this was her fault? Why am I jumping to this conclusion, right? So that was one of the goals. I don't think it will ever really go away, to be honest with you.
I don't either. I
Yeah.
probably one person at a time.
Yeah.
Maybe if you get 10 people to buy the book, maybe one person will go, oh, okay. Maybe I should
Yeah.
look at why I'm doing this. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I hope to do with the podcast. So
Oh, nice.
just to educate people as to why they're they do what they do. And then hopefully I don't ever see it going away. But if I can get one person out of 10, that would be good.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed when I talk to a lot of my conservative friends, I've noticed that they tend to stay in a community where there's people that are like them and they're just bouncing the same ideas off of one another.
Yes. Yeah.
And they really do not go outside or explore outside of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And you tend to get your strongest views, and that's on both sides.
Yes, I agree.
So,
Yeah.
I've always, what do you do? What do I tell? Usually what I tell them is maybe you should get some other friends that you should spend some time with that are a little bit different than you.
Yeah.
But in this last political, you could just see it. It was all over the place. I had no idea what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are disappointed that believe that we're in a country that is so what I say, so conservative in their thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Can we talk about the age of Donald Trump or what you think has brought that on?
What makes him so appealing, you mean, to some people?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think part of the way I argue in the book that he managed to get so popular was that I think he places blame for problems in a way that does appeal to a certain segment of the population.
Gotcha.
So there are people who feel like, well, I'm not getting what I deserve. I thought I'd be making more money right now, or I thought I would have a bigger house. And, why are people of color getting special advantages? That kind of an attitude. And I think for someone like that, somebody who comes along and says, oh, the problem is immigrants, right? Or, whatever it might be, the problem is, critical race theory, or the problem is trans rights. It's sort of an easy scapegoat for people to feel like, oh, okay, this guy knows what it is and he's going to come in and solve the problem. It sort of fits with their kind of worldview. So, and I think he did it even in his first presidency. You remember he was, China was responsible for COVID, and, Muslims were responsible for terrorism. And there was all of this kind of rhetoric going on all the time. And I think it is a simple sort of rhetoric that appeals to people who are unhappy, right? And they want someone to blame. And I think it sort of preserves this view of a world they like, where, white men were on top. And, make America great again, to me, means we want to go back to a point before everybody had rights.
Right.
So that would appeal to someone, right, who feels like, oh, I would have been better off in that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
My question, one of the things I think about that is I look at it like people are in those communities that I was talking about, and they don't go outside of those communities.
Yeah.
If you're looking at, in my opinion, you're looking at the medical industry, you see foreign people, probably from India and the Middle East, that are really, really good students in the medical field. And I feel like that's a threat to white men.
Interesting. Yeah.
I've had a doctor tell me that. He's just told me, he's an older white guy. He says it's just too many foreigners, right? But when you go to medical school now, it's a lot of these. The better students are the Indians and the people from the Middle East, and that's just the bottom line. And that's from hearing it from people that I know that are in medical school.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you look at foreign people that start businesses in this country, I believe the 2 and 3 most over the last 5 years, most of the business starts in this country have been from women and Hispanic people, especially Hispanic women. I think they're number 2 and 3 in business starts.
Wow.
I don't think this is going to stop. I feel why they're feeling like those are the challenges that they're dealing with. And a simple way to say it is there's too many foreigners. We don't want the DEI in schools. We don't want immigrants over here. What are some of the other challenges that they deal with? I got to tell you, the people that I run into, Hispanic, the guys, they work harder than Americans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when you say those things, I just see it on a daily basis, but I tend to look for it. So maybe, I guess, other people are not seeing it. So
Yeah.
Your thoughts on what do you think's coming with I know it's hard to tell, but how do you foresee things going in the future with a Trump presidency?
It's pretty unpredictable. I mean,
yeah,
it's the thing about Trump. You never know. You know, there are doom and gloom scenarios where you can imagine things getting much worse, and you know, people being deported all over the place, and all kinds of crackdowns. But there are lots of things he threatened the first term that never really came to be. So I'm trying myself not to overreact, because some of it is a bit scary. I totally agree with what you were just saying. My father was an Arab immigrant. And so I know firsthand like what the stereotypes are and what it was like for him, et cetera. And so for people like me, it's particularly scary. I would definitely be on the bad list, right? But it's really hard to know. I've been trying to kind of sit back and watch. I mean, he really wants, I think, to be seen as a good president. I sometimes wonder if that might help a little bit, that whatever his impulses are, I think that in some ways, he didn't do as much damage the last time as I feared.
I think it was a little bit different with the people that were around him.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been following Donald Trump since the 80s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So what I've seen over the years is he doesn't do a lot of what he says he's going to do. I don't really think he does a lot of anything that he likes, other than what he likes, which is probably playing golf and being in the spotlight. I don't really think he did much when he was president last time to help anything.
No.
So I don't know. He has different people around him now, so we'll see. But it's just interesting. So in your book, you talk about ideology and the reason for hope. So can you address that?
Yeah. So what the chapter is, it's about a few different things. And I was trying to end on a sort of a positive note.
Right.
So one of the things I say is that I don't think we're quite as ideologically divided as it feels. And I think part of it is the media driving it, and politicians themselves are much
terrible.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Media's terrible.
Yeah. There's no, there's nothing like the equivalent of the sort of news shows we had as kids, right? And so now every show is kind of like a spectacle, and they're only, like you were saying, they only appeal to one side, et cetera. So there's so little crossover. But when I talk to regular people, even people that I disagree with, I often find them to be more reasonable than you would be led to believe, right? And I know in my own classes, I teach a course in political psychology, and I've had some, most students in my college are pretty liberal, but I've had some very conservative students in that class. And it's been really civil. People can disagree, but everybody left feeling like, okay, I think I understand better their worldview. It's not as extreme or as, offensive as I was imagining. I've had a couple of breakthrough moments in my years of teaching where I've seen like liberal and conservative students interacting over some issue and realizing that, they'll say like, oh, okay, I see why you might think that. They can sort of see each other's thinking process a little bit better.
Right.
But also there's a lot of evidence that people can, with new information, we can change. So there've been studies where they show, for example, even little simple studies where they have somebody come in and do a poverty simulation where they have to imagine living as a poor person. It's like a computer simulation. And people come out of that blaming the poor less because they realized, like, for the first time, what it was really confronting you in that situation, right?
Right.
So those kind of things give me hope. I think Americans in general are a little more reasonable than we're being led to believe. That everybody isn't on one extreme end or the other, right? A lot of people are just not that engaged in politics. And
yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah.
It's like 1/3 of the country voted for Trump. Basically, little less than 1/3 voted for Kamala Harris, and then 1/3 did not participate.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of really apathetic Americans.
Yeah, and I can't understand why they're that way, and they just had no interest in voting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, I think maybe I'm being too generous to the general public, but I think part of it is politicians themselves are to blame. I really do think I have my own political attitudes, but I would say I don't think either party addresses the regular person as much as they should. I think there is a certain kind of condescending attitude they have. And there are lots of things that Americans would agree about. And I don't feel like either party does a particularly good job of giving people hope for the future. There are a lot of Americans now who say it doesn't really matter who's president. My life doesn't get any better no matter what. When that's the case, then why vote, right? You just think, like, what's the difference? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think, a lot of what we're dealing with is corporate capitalism and influence. And I feel like that tends to be where the majority of the politicians focus on where their money's coming from.
Yes.
So, and when you look at it as a whole in general in society, I think certain classes, the middle class and the lower class, they tend to lose out when it gets to that point because, they're not worrying about what they're, if you're in a, you're in impoverished situation, you're not worrying about, your 401k, you're worrying about how you're going to eat for the day.
Yeah. And those people are left behind. I think you're right.
Yeah. And then middle class, you're worrying about how to pay for your insurance, your health insurance, because it's so high.
Yeah.
Are we losing the skill to communicate, you think?
I do worry that we are, actually. And I think part of it is exactly what you were saying earlier, that we're increasingly isolated into our own little groups of people who agree with us, not only in human face-to-face interactions, but in social media, right? And these algorithms that show us everything that we want to see.
Yeah.
So I do think that it is a problem because there's a lot of evidence now that the hatred between people on the left and right is to such an extreme level. Like, there was a study a couple of years ago where they found that both conservatives and liberals were extremely horrified by the idea of their child marrying someone in the other party. So this idea that it's become a social identity like race, right? In fact, they were more upset by a child marrying someone in the other party than someone in another race, which you know
Wow.
the history of racism in this country, right? That's
Right.
really saying something, you know.
Right.
If you hate Democrats more than you hate people of color or whatever, so it is worrisome, and I do worry that I don't know how it's going to go away, because it just feels like the media feed it, the social media totally do, and we're increasingly living in, you know, we're drawn to living in areas where there are people who are politically like us, right? So if I'm a liberal, I'm going to tend toward blue states, et cetera. So that worries me. I do worry that we're going to get to the point where it's so bad that it's unfixable. I mean, I don't think we're there yet. I like to think that things will swing back at some point, but it really does seem to be a problem. So I think we can learn things from hearing other people's viewpoints, right? Even if we don't agree with them.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't just cancel them out, you know.
Right.
I think you should at least look or listen. You because there's a book that you don't like, you shouldn't burn it. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't
Right.
get rid of it.
That's squelching of that stuff is a little bit scary.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to get your thoughts about the psychology of the shooter, that the person that went after that United Healthcare CEO.
Oh yeah, Luigi.
Yes, Luigi. The reaction, and oh my God, it was all over the place with
Yes.
us. And I think that's kind of an example of everything we talked about, where a certain segment of the population is being ignored.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was the whole point with him. He just felt like he was being ignored. And then there was a segment of the population that thought what he did was despicable. And then some of them were touting him as a hero. I just want to wait and see about the trial and see everything that comes out before I make a decision on it. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting case, because after it was publicized, all these people were coming out saying, "Oh, here's what the the insurance company did to me. They're denying legitimate claim, et cetera." So it just goes to show you how deep the dissatisfaction is in this country with these companies. They're making tons of money, charging like crazy, and then refusing to cover things, right? And so it's pretty despicable. And I think it does sort of show that sort of divide between the sort of very rich and everybody else, right? I think most regular people can kind of, most people probably wouldn't endorse murder, but they would say, yeah, I can understand why he was frustrated. And I think for the rich folks, it's very threatening, because it says, oh my God, maybe we can't keep doing this anymore. And it's interesting, you know, one of the things with Trump's new term is that he's got these super rich, I mean, his whole, you know, he's got Elon Musk and people like that who are among the wealthiest people in the world, who have never been elected, have no official government position, but now we're going to be influencing politics. So I think it's like we're really going to an extreme, I think, in the way that money is kind of running things.
Yeah.
So for me, that's what it laid bare, was this feeling of frustration. I was really quite surprised by the reaction.
Yeah. And it's a little scary to me, because I can actually see it going in that direction. The people that are in his administration are very similar to, I guess, would be a CEO of a company. And if people don't feel as though they have a voice, I'm a little worried that things like this are going to continue to happen. How are you going to protect people? Yeah.
No, it's true. Yeah. If someone's frustration is that deep and they have no avenue for getting any help, then I agree with you. I think it is a bit scary that the situation has become so hopeless for so many Americans.
Oh, I'm really nervous now.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to make you feel worse.
Yeah, it's just, well, I'm nervous for where we are. I'm trying to recall. I stopped listening to the news after the last election.
Uh-huh.
at all, because they don't know what's going on, and then the influences that they're having on people are they're detrimental, negative,
Yeah.
polarizing. Stop listening to them. And then I ask why. I'm listening most of the time. I listen to podcasts
Uh-huh.
or YouTube, and I want to know why these people are doing what they're doing. So
Right.
it's a little scary.
It
Um,
is.
so what else do you have? Articles have you written? What do you have out?
Well, most of the stuff was from before the book. So I did one piece about, as I was saying, abortion attitudes. A long time ago, I did one about attitudes toward poverty. This was sort of the first big study I did about how people perceive the causes of poverty, and that, again, if they see it as controllable by the poor, they're lazy, et cetera, they tend to be angry and not want to help. It's the sort of same model.
What have you?
And then, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm starting to get a little coffee here. What have you seen with not so much are you talking about not so much the cause, but the thought as to about poverty, as to why people are still after generations stuck in it, or tell me exactly what you were focused on when you were doing your research?
Yes. So really, it was just asking people to rate how important various causes of poverty are. So things like, is laziness a major cause of poverty, or is lack of jobs? Some are societal causes like lack of jobs, discrimination, lack of educational opportunity, things like that. And others were about the poor person themselves, like they're lazy, they're on drugs, right? They're an alcoholic, they don't know how to manage money, that kind of stuff. And the results are pretty common sense, really. It just confirms what you know already, which is that if you blame the person, then you think, I'm angry with them. I don't think we should, I don't think we should have welfare, et cetera. And if you blame the society, then you feel very differently. So it all kind of fits the pattern. And there's a link with ideology in that conservatives in general are more likely to hold the individual responsible. It's kind of a hallmark of being conservative, right? Yeah. Everybody has to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas liberals are more likely to believe that society has some responsibility for giving people certain, and maybe, maybe healthcare, maybe a certain reasonable standard of living, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So the usual kind of things that you would expect came out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to question you. What are your thoughts to why people continuously stay in impoverished? The majority of our culture stays in an impoverished situation if they're born in an impoverished situation.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts about that? What do you think is the cause?
It's a controversial topic, because I'm sure about various politicians who've talked about the sort of culture of poverty, that people just learn bad habits from being poor. I don't actually personally believe that. I think it's an incredibly difficult thing, and there's a lot of data to show this. It is extremely hard to raise your social class. There are so many advantages you get from being middle class or rich in this country, that if you really grew up in a poor family, it's like starting 10 feet below the ground, right? And so the climb is so much steeper. And so I think it's really naive to say, well, anybody can succeed in this country, you just have to try hard enough.
Right.
I don't think the data support that. I think they actually, I'm unwilling to believe that everybody born poor is lazy. I think it's, you would just have huge disadvantages, and it's extremely hard to pull yourself back out, right?
Yeah. I agree with you. I've worked with some guys that, I think the majority of it comes down to education.
Yeah.
I think education is the equalizer to all those rising above any situation. But I know guys that work hard, and they don't know how to manage money. They don't know what to do with it.
Right.
They weren't educated to figure out how to take one step and go to the next. They're just trying to survive. They just want to get something to eat for that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
and feed their family. So I think, and I right now, I just think that's where we are in the country. People that are controlling the courts and everything believe that you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps right now,
Right.
but they don't completely understand that these people are not educated enough to be able to do that. And it's not just books. It could be with anything,
Yeah.
finance.
Yeah.
It could be with, just how simply creating a budget and staying on a plan every day.
Yeah.
And just doing that for a period of time will get you make progress. Will give you an opportunity to make progress. So I think that's where we are.
Yeah.
And it's sad because now the things that were put in place to help people like that are being removed. So interesting.
It is scary. Yeah. And I think people don't want to acknowledge that what the real cause is. I mean, if you look at so many countries in the world where education is free, it just makes a huge difference, right? When education is a commodity that you can either afford or not, it's not a very good recipe for equality, right?
Right. And people are leaving clues. That's why you have people coming here going to our institutions, because they understand the importance of education.
Yeah.
And they're amongst the top earning groups in this country. So they figured it out.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, they figured it out.
All right.
Interesting. So what do you have coming up?
Well, I'm actually thinking. I took a little break after the book came out. I will tell you, I was a little tired out. It's intense finishing a book.
Yeah.
But I'm working on a couple of studies now. One of which is about people's beliefs about war and the kinds of appeals to peace that make the most sense to people. So one study I just started working on with a couple of colleagues is about whether or not people are more concerned about the human cost of war or the environmental cost of war. I don't know how much you follow this, but there's a lot of discussion, for example, in Gaza about obviously there was a huge human cost, but there are people who seem more concerned about what it's doing to the environment, or at least as concerned about it. So that's one thing to sort of think about. And then I'm just in the beginning phases of another study. I'm really interested in people's reactions to the conflict in the Middle East, partly because I am Palestinian American myself. And so I'm in the beginning stages of a study in which I'm trying to present scenarios to people describing the conflict in various ways to see how it affects their attitudes. So, yeah, because in the popular press, right, they often talk about it as though the conflict started on October 7th. But in fact, it's been going on for 75 years, right? And so
actually longer.
Yeah. But
it's been going on for centuries. Do you have any of the questions? Just test me if you can. Do you have any of that? I'm just curious.
Oh, I'm not that far along yet.
Oh, okay, good. All right, but when you haven't once you finish, I would love to have you come back and talk about that.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I find it fascinating and interesting. So I'm beside myself. I don't know where to come down on what side.
Yeah.
I sympathize with both sides, and the loss of human life is just it's just devastating to me. So
it's horrible. Yeah.
It's very interesting. So I'm looking forward to that coming out. So energize yourself so we can get to that book.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm about ready to get going again. As I say, it is it's exhausting writing a book, and then you're doing events afterwards and everything. So I'm sort of just getting my research feet on the ground again, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay. I would like to get a signed copy. I have a copy of my Kindle, but I would love to get a signed copy of yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just give me an address and I'll send you one. I'm happy to.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. I'll pay for it.
Oh, don't worry about it. You were kind to have me on your show.
Oh, no, it was excellent to have you on. I appreciate you coming on and talking about these things. These are questions that people have, and they don't have answers to.
Yeah, there's a lot of us are confused, right? It's a strange time in the history of the world, it feels like. It's overwhelming sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, any final thoughts?
No, I think I would just say try not to blame too much. That's what the message. Try to think a little more deeply before you assume somebody's at fault.
Have patience
Yes.
and grace.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, doctor.
Yeah.
All right. All right. That's it. Well,
All right.
thank you everyone for tuning in to Listen Up. We will catch you next time on Listen Up. You have a great day. Bye. For anyone watching this channel, I ask that you please like and subscribe for upcoming videos.